Hey everybody, Polymarket versus Kalshi and how they work, right? So the prediction markets and what they trade are event contracts, and the governing agency is the CFTC because event contracts are viewed as a commodity derivative, right? And so Polymarket existed for like almost 10 years on like a no action letter, right? And I've talked about no action letters in different contexts before, where it's basically like you write a letter to a regulator, give you anybody, and says, hey, this is what we want to do. Would you recommend enforcement action if we continue to operate in this way? And they say, we wouldn't at this time, and it's very like qualified, but they like operated under this letter forever. Then Kalshi came along, and Kalshi just basically said, hey, listen, we're going to do it the right way, and we're going to register as a designated contract market. And that's similar to like an ATS in the securities world, right? So it's basically just a market license for trading certain futures and futures derivatives, right? But not in the sense of like a national securities exchange or commodities exchange. So Kalshi did that and went along, and then eventually problems arose with Polymarket, and they had to like stop. They settled with the CFTC, and then have since obtained a designated contract market arrangement. So the question that I get a lot is, like it looks like betting, right? Because you're predicting different outcomes, right? From anything, right? And it's political, and now like sports, right? You see, and even like Robinhood is connected into it, and they have a DCM license as well. And like you can just basically choose these outcomes based on what you think. Now, this isn't gaming, right? Or sports wagering, because event contracts, one, are governed by the federal government and are exempt from the definition of gaming and gaming laws, right? The general prohibition against gaming. And the reason being this: a futures contract cannot exist unless two people want to agree, right? So whether it's corn or, who's going to win, some basketball game tonight, it doesn't matter, right? You need two people on each side. So an event contract is a futures contract. And if you look at, either of these markets, you'll see that it's not odds in the traditional sense. You just see that the price of the contract, depending on which side you want to get on, is lower, presumably, for the least attractive outcome, right? And that bet, if you want to call it that, can only exist if there's people on both sides, just like a regular futures market, commodities market. So like if you want to buy a December future for corn, you want to go long corn, well, there has to be somebody who's willing to sell it, right? And if there's nobody that's willing to sell it, that contract will never be made. And so the same thing goes forth here, right? And so the question becomes like, how do you emulate that? And becoming a designated contract market is no small feat. It's like an ATS, right? It's very few. And it's the purview of institutions for the large part. And can you emulate that in any other way, right? To like not only not violate gaming laws, but not violate commodities laws? And the answer is really no, right? Because if you make this to be, and sports wagering is, well, one would say there's skill involved, the government doesn't see it that way, right? So it's always going to be viewed as like chance. So, and yes, there's the carve out for like peer-to-peer fantasy and all that, but that's really it. So like when you're just talking about outcomes of something, it's always going to fall under gaming. And if you structure it in the sense of like a contract where the value of the contract, is dependent upon the perceived value of that outcome, then you fall under the financial derivative, the futures derivative definition found in the Commodities Act. And you then, in order to make a market, would need the DCM license, right? So that's how they do it, and that's how they operate. And it's like, yes, can you go offshore and emulate this? 100% you can, okay? Would it be viewed as gaming in certain jurisdictions? Yes. But the nuance of like offshore is that you very rarely see separate laws for securities and commodities like we do, right? Like it's all lumped under securities, and it's overwhelmingly defined by securities products and not commodities products. So like these event contracts, which is really unique to the United States, you look at it and could you create that market like with a Mauritius financial dealer's license? Yes, I think you could, right? Could you create it in Vanuatu with their financial dealer's license? Yes, you could, right? Could you create it in, a few other jurisdictions under some kind of quasi securities license? Yes. Or Forex license, really. Yes, absolutely, right? But again, that isn't going to help you with the United States, right? Because there's going to be a strong prohibition against onboarding U.S. persons. The rest of the world, mix and match. You could probably hit a lot, especially in like Asia, where they don't really care about outside, offshore, financial institutions, gaming operations. But for purposes of the U.S., there's no way to end run this sort of conundrum where you're bumping against two very, very set in stone laws, the Commodities Act and the Unlawful Internet Gaming Act, and then all the state level prohibitions that come with it about gaming. So that is the prediction markets in a nutshell, and the solutions or lack thereof to sort of emulate what they're doing, which is basically go offshore and do it however you want to do it. So if you have questions about those licenses, how to set it up, how to structure, related token gaming, trading simulations, anything like that, definitely check me out. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.